So look, over this past weekend, I flew over to my local comic book shop to see what's new, only to realize ain't nothing new at all. And actually, I never noticed so many of these comic books been remixing the same superpowers, rerunning the same storylines, and hell, even sometimes the exact same characters. Since, well, day one apparently. And tonight, I'm only talking strictly Marvel and DC. Even though there's a whole multiverse of other publishers I'm sure pulling the same move. Also, I guess it's worth mentioning, I'm your host, Sal G. And while I'm here, I should probably let you in on a little secret. My superpowers obviously bringing all this forgotten lore back to your attention. Now that we got that out the way, back to my revelation. So come to find out, Marvel and DC are essentially $2 billion companies looking over each other's shoulders going, oh, that's what we doing this year? Say word. They've been the longest passive-aggressive relationship in human, well in this case, mostly not so human history. And they don't even try to hide it. So one company creates a guy with unusual power, then the other company waits till the end of the season and it's all, okay, but what if ours wore green and blue instead of red and blue? And listen, this ain't me hating. I mean, look at my hands. I love comic books. I'm clearly locked in. I'm the kind of purist who knows what issue somebody first appeared in, what world they came from, and what editor was secretly beefing with the pencil at the time. I ain't finna say no names. Okay, maybe a couple. I know, I got problems. But we all do. But once you start paying attention to this copycat behavior, you're now Roddy Piper, and they live. You can't unsee it, with or without the shades. Like for instance, let's kick this off with the most disrespectfully obvious example, and that would be Deadpool and Deathstroke. I mean, come on, seriously. Alright, so the history goes, DC creates Deathstroke first in New Teen Titans issue number 2 in 1980. And Deathstroke's real name? Well, that would be Slade Wilson. Then Marvel comes along in 1991, a full 11 years later, with a character named Deadpool in New Mutants issue 98. And what's Deadpool's real name, you ask? Well, that would be Wade Wilson. So we went from Slade to Wade. Clearly y'all wasn't even trying to hide it. I mean, that's not inspiration. That's just plagiarism with well-timed jokes. Like, y'all can't think we that dumb. That'll be like me creating a superhero named Batfella, whose secret identity is Brucey Wayans. And yes, I know, Deadpool evolved into the more well-known of the duo, but early on, let's face it, he was basically Spider-Man's mouth with Deathstroke's, well, everything else. It became so obvious that even the creative Sir Fabian Nicieza had to admit the similarities was intentional. And because I know we were all wondering, Deathstroke does stand a chance in a hand-to-hand combat versus Deadpool, but that's because he's naturally smarter and stronger. But Deadpool will win a fight to the death due to his healing power that makes him pretty much impossible to, how do I put this? Well, unalive. You see, the difference between these two, Deathstroke fights like a military strategist, and Deadpool fights like a raccoon trapped inside a fireworks factory with immortal capabilities of an American cockroach. One's calculating, and the other survives purely off chaos, healing factor, and not respecting OSHA regulations. Then you got Green Arrow from DC. He debuted in 1941 during World War II timeline-wise, was a rich dude with the bow and arrow gimmick, and basically he was Robin Hood in a cooler costume. Then Marvel said, what if we did that, but purple? So out of nowhere during the Vietnam era, Hawkeye debuts. That's right, a whole 23 years later. That's a whole generation. But he had the same bow, same gimmicks, but equipped with a cocky attitude. The only real differences are that Green Arrow talks like he's a politician at a town hall, and Hawkeye talks like your slicker older cousin who has an idea he always needs you to invest in, which tracks generationally. And of course, one is in Celtics green and the other's in Lakers purple. But if these two was to squabble, it would actually be a coin flip fight, even money at -110 apiece. And that hurts me to say because Green Arrow got billionaire resources and enough trick arrows to start his own Home Depot out. Well, Lowe's if he was a real one though. But Clint Barton has mechanically fought gods, killer robots, alien invasions, and went up on a Tuesday full of Avenger level threats. You see, Green Arrow is accurate, but you gotta understand, Hawkeye is, I once shot a moving target while falling out of an exploding aircraft type accurate. Understand the difference? So we know Oliver Queen wins the speech, and Clint Barton is where my money will lie. Most importantly, who do you all got with this one? But this next one is where things, well, get slippery. So everybody jokes Aquaman copying Neymar. And honestly, timeline says maybe. So Neymar the Submariner debuted in the Great Depression times in 1939 for Marvel's OG, known as Timely Comics. Quite the time for that name, but their comic books then were merely a dime. Anywho, Aquaman debuted a couple years later in 1941 for the same double nickel. They were both Atlanteans, both ruled the ocean, both super strong, both communicate with sea life. But you see the main difference? The main difference was Neymar acts like he's one bad day away from declaring war on the surface world. But Aquaman was essentially just tired of y'all making merman jokes. Now this fight would depend entirely on where they fighting. Are we talking on land? Neymar probably wins because on land Neymar got that I actively hate humanity strength boost. I mean, he fights like every surface dweller, or as we know them, traditional humans, personally offended him. Michael Jordan, I took that personal-esque motivation to see him through the finish line. But underwater, Aquaman is terrifyingly underrated. You do know he's gone toe-to-toe with Superman-level threats, right? He commands the entire ocean and can summon enough sea life to turn a battlefield into a live-action seafood buffet. So if we talking full power underwater, Aquaman Superman wins. On land, Namor and his anger management issues gets this one. Did I mention the Swamp Wars in 71? Alright, so look, DC gives us Swamp Thing in 1971. Then, not so coincidentally, Marvel gives us Man Thing, also in 1971. What Arsenio say? Things that make you go, Now you know your character name and strategy failed when it sounds like somebody gave up in the final draft. Hey boss, what should we call him? I don't know, he's a man thingy, so I don't know, let's try Man Thing for now. And then Marvel said, nah, we gotta rush the set. So their actual titled Man Thing technically hit shelves first by a couple of months. I know what you're thinking. Sal, there's no way this comic I never heard of predated Swamp Thing, but it's indeed a fact. Anywho, both were heavily inspired by the older 1940s monster called the Heap, but that's a deeper, darker criminal link. But if these swamp dudes happen to duke it out, Swamp Thing absolutely dog walks Man Thing, and it ain't even close. You see, Man Thing's dangerous because if you fear him, all it takes is his touch to burn you. Swamp Thing, on the other hand, no pun intended, is basically the physical embodiment of all plant life on Earth. At his strongest, he's less a monster and more of an environmental event. You not fighting the swamp anymore. You fighting photosynthesis itself. Now, not to rush ahead. Actually, time out. So you see, DC had the Flash first. Like, way first. Yeah, this guy, Jay Garrick. He was the original that debuted in 1940. Then in 1956, Barry Allen reinvented the character to the one that we're familiar with today, with the lightning ears and the red costume. Then all of a sudden, well, in 8 years sudden, Marvel gives us Quicksilver in 1964. And I know, Quicksilver's personality is completely different. But power-wise, he basically has the same powers, but what if the Flash needed more intensive therapy? Boom, you have Quicksilver. And if these two was to race or fight, well then the Flash would embarrass Quicksilver. No pun intended. So quick it'd be disrespectful. You gotta understand, Barry Allen's already outrun death, outran time. I mean, hell, he's even outran teleportation somehow, which still doesn't make scientific sense. Now, I will admit, Quicksilver is indeed quick, but Flash is basically a physics glitch that needs to be studied. We actually shouldn't skip over the fact that he was running through dimensions. I know, quite the rush, right? Okay, this one time in 1970, DC creates the ruler of Planet Apocalypse, the god of evil, named Darkseid, created by the comic book king himself, Jack Kirby. Then, in 1973, Marvel creators was told, if you're gonna rip off Darkseid, at least make him bigger. So immediately after that suggestion, Jim Starlin created, not so coincidentally, Thanos. Then he even openly admitted he was directly inspired by Darkseid. That right there is comic history, and well, proof I'm not tripping. I mean, not to play Monday morning quarterback, but the similarities are, well, obvious. Both purple cosmic tyrants, obsessed with power, with the main difference being Darkseid felt like inevitable doom. And Thanos, on the other hand, felt like a guy who read one philosophy book and has to bestow his knowledge to whoever is forced to listen that day. But when it boils down to a 1v1, Darkseid wins easily. That is, as long as Thanos doesn't have the Infinity Gauntlet. Because Darkseid isn't just strong, he's a cosmic concept in the literal sense. Meanwhile, Thanos, even at his most dangerous, is still technically a dude with emotional issues, and let's admit, excellent chin posture. Darkseid got a mega beams that curve around corners, and Thanos got what? Long speeches and self-esteem problems? So without the gauntlet, Darkseid's turning Thanos into purple haze. Shout out to Cam. So here's where I let you in on the fact that only us comic book insiders care to pay attention to. So comic book king and legend himself, Jack Kirby, left Marvel for DC in 1970. At DC, he creates the new gods, Darkseid being one of the main ones. Then, not so surprisingly later, Marvel suddenly got cosmic tyrants and space mythology everywhere. So if you're not paying attention, which you should be, to make a long story short, essentially Kirby's fingerprints are on both universes. This ain't new neither. We can't forget when Marvel got caught making a Superman clone so blatant DC almost sued a forgotten character known as Wondar the Aquarian. Cool name, but not as catchy if you ask me. Anywho, he debuted in 1973. Same old tale though, alien baby sent from a doomed planet, superpowers raised on Earth, yada yada yada. DC looked over and was like, alright, hold on. You cloned our headliner bar for bar? Which forced Marvel to be like, no, we just had similar ideas. And then they redesigned them completely to avoid legal smoke. You gotta imagine creating a character that's such an obvious dupe, you gotta involve lawyers? And let's be honest, if Superman fought Wondar, that fight lasts about as long as it took DC to recognize he was a knockoff. Come on, y'all. Superman been scaling universe-level threats since before my pop-up was born, God rest his soul. Then Marvel seemingly doubled down, no bunless chicken sandwich, when they created the Squadron Supreme. Dog, what was going on with these name selection pitch meetings? Come on, seriously? Squadron Supreme? Never mind. But it was basically a Temu Justice League. Sometimes these copycat characters and stories were more popular and the writing in them was much more gripping than who they were emulating. And if the Justice League called Squadron Supreme in a crossover issue, look, before I say this, I actually like Squadron Supreme. It's not every day superheroes say, you know what, the government doesn't work the way it's currently constructed. Why don't we just run it ourselves and fix everything? But again, if it was a crossover, Justice League would still take it. Now that I think about it, Batman might have created an entire genre of emotionally unavailable billionaires. Hey Iron Man, this is about you. You know, the billionaire with parental trauma with no real superpowers but plenty of tech and capitalism to make you a superhero. Essentially comparable to Elon's ultimate goal today. And if Iron Man fought Batman, real rap, Tony Stark's probably Washington. if they ran into each other. Let's face it, he's got more advanced armor, more firepower, more range. But if it's a promoted fight that Batman knows is going down and he got prep time, oh brother, here we go. Batman with prep time is basically a comic book cheat code. But once you start studying comic history, you realize these companies weren't just competing. They were, how do I say this? Man, they were subbing each other for decades. DC would create something mythic, then Marvel will respond with something grounded. Next Marvel gets edgy, so DC turns darker. One creates an anti-hero, the other creates a grumpier anti-hero with more belts. Essentially, they were, shameless plug here, the original WWE versus WCW Monday Night Wars. By the way, check out that episode if you missed it. And comic fans benefit from all of it. Because honestly, without the competition, half of these characters probably never would have evolved into the legends we know them as today. With that being said, next time somebody tells you Marvel copied DC or no, DC copied Marvel, the answer is, well, yes, in one way or another, and repeatedly, for 8 decades and counting. And for that, we're grateful, or at least we should be. Because now I get endless amounts of lore to go back and deep dive into before I sit in the back of a theater and these live action renditions complaining about how they aren't comic book accurate. So in closing, half of these heroes are cousins, and nobody can convince me otherwise. But for now, subscribe, comment, and share, and I'll see you next time. Peace.